Extinction didn't erase their terror. It sealed their legacy in blood and bone. For over 600 million years, our planet was a proving ground for predators, and nature kept the rules of survival. It's humbling to consider that even the most fearsome hunters weren't always the biggest beasts around. I find it fascinating that the first Smilodon remains unearthed baffled scientists. They mistook its cheek teeth for those of a hyena. It just goes to show how a partial picture can completely mislead you before the full form of a formidable predator comes into view. Imagine being an apex predator, ruling the wild at the top of the food chain. Life at the top has its perks, but here's the thing. When it comes to the predator game, size isn't everything. Yet every so often, nature outdoes itself, creating a carnivore so specialized, so perfectly adapted to hunting big game that it seems almost like a creature of myth. These rare beasts develop weapons tailored specifically for tackling the giants of their time. And not too long ago, just a blink of an eye in Earth's timeline, one such feline prowled our planet. This wasn't just any big cat. This was the undisputed monarch of the Ice Age. Meet the Smilodon, the saber-toothed cat extraordinaire. With its iconic saber teeth and fierce appearance, Smilodon is one of the most instantly recognizable extinct predators, a status only solidified by its portrayal in popular films like Ice Age. But while the world knows it as a saber-toothed cat, it didn't start out that way. Rewind the clock about 160 years and picture yourself in Brazil. It's here that our tale begins with a discovery that would perplex the scientific community. When the first Smilodon remains were unearthed, paleontologists didn't immediately recognize them as belonging to a cat. In fact, their initial guess was way off the mark. Based on some isolated cheek teeth that bore an uncanny resemblance to those of modern hyenas, they dubbed this new find Hyena neogaea. However, within a couple of years, the tides of discovery brought forth a tsunami of new fossils. Suddenly, scientists weren't just looking at a few teeth, but a veritable jigsaw puzzle of prehistoric proportions. Foot bones, skull fragments, and those iconic canines, which, by the way, seemed almost comically oversized for any mouth, painted a very different picture. As the pieces fell into place, it became clear that this was no hyena. Instead, they were dealing with a completely new genus of Feline, one that was not only massive in size, but also built like a prehistoric tank. This feline was far more robust than any modern cat, a true heavyweight champion of the Ice Age. In light of this revelation, a new name was in order. Thus, Smilodon Populator was born. Smilodon meaning knife tooth, and Populator, roughly translating to the destroyer or he who brings devastation. And it's a fitting moniker for a predator that redefined what it meant to be lethal. With its new identity established, the scientific community dove headfirst into unraveling the Smilodon's family tree. This quest for understanding continues to this day, with researchers currently placing our knife-toothed friend in the extinct subfamily Machairodontinae. This subfamily is home to most of what we colloquially call saber-toothed tigers, though saber-toothed cats is more accurate, since these ancient felines aren't closely related to modern tigers or any living cats, for that matter. In fact, their closest living relatives might be members of the Feline subfamily, which includes our domestic kitties. Within the Machairodontinae, Smilodon found itself in an even more exclusive club, the Smilodontini, or as some paleontologists like to call them, the Dirk-Toothed cats. This group is pretty exclusive, with only 5 known genera calling it home. But what Smilodontini lacks in diversity, it makes up for in star power, thanks to Smilodon. As research progressed, scientists discovered that Smilodon wasn't a lone standout. It was more like a prehistoric trio with 3 distinct members, each bringing something unique to the table: S. Gracilis, S. Fatalis, and S. Populator. Now, if you found yourself face to face with any of these species, you probably wouldn't be too concerned with which one was about to turn you into lunch, but they did have their differences. First up, we have S. Gracilis, the elder statesman of the group. This OG appeared in North America about 2.5 million years ago, descending from an even older genus called Meganterian. Next came S. Fatalis, strutting onto the scene roughly 1 million years later. Last, but certainly not least, S. Populator made its grand entrance about 600,000 years after Fatalis, fashionably late to the Ice Age party. S. Gracilis, while no slouch in the size department, was the runt of the litter, tipping the scales at about the same weight as a modern jaguar. S. Fatalis, living up to its name, was a step up in the terror department, matching an African lion in size, but packing on extra muscle like a feline bodybuilder. We're talking about 280 kilos or 620 pounds of prehistoric fury that's on par with the largest tigers roaming the earth today. But S. Populator dominated them all. This behemoth pushed the boundaries of felid physiology, with the largest known specimens estimated to have weighed in at a jaw-dropping 470 kilos or 1,040 pounds. To put that in perspective, that's about the same as a medium-sized polar bear. Interestingly, unlike many modern big cats, Smilodons didn't seem to be too hung up on gender norms. Studies suggest that there wasn't a significant size difference between males and females, a trait scientists call low sexual dimorphism. In practical terms, this means that regardless of whether you are facing a male Smilodon or a female Smilodon, I've often wondered what it must have been like to face a Smilodon. Being big is impressive, but this wasn't just a large cat. It was built like a prehistoric tank. Its heel bone was a marvel of natural engineering, robust and elongated. Some paleontologists even speculate that these Ice Age acrobats could have outleaped modern lions, which have been observed clearing heights of 15 feet. Imagine a cat the size of a bear, capable of leaping over a 1-story building. But the Smilodon's athletic prowess didn't stop at its fancy footwork. If modern big cats have arms that could crush you, Smilodon's forelimbs took it to the next level. We're talking about limbs that were approximately 20% thicker than what you'd expect for a cat of its size, giving it incredible strength, surpassing even that of the larger American lion. And at the end of those muscular arms, Smilodon was further armed with fully retractable claws, razor-sharp and curved like prehistoric scimitars. They were proportionally enormous, even for a cat of Smilodon size. We're talking about claws twice the size of a Siberian tiger's and even longer than those of a Kodiak brown bear, an animal that can weigh twice as much as a Smilodon. These weren't just weapons. They were nature's equivalent of grappling hooks, perfect for latching onto large prey. But let's be real. When we think of Smilodon, it's not its impressive vertical leap or powerful forearms that come to mind. It's all about those teeth, those iconic, impossibly long canines that have captured imaginations for generations. Now, saber teeth aren't unique to Smilodon. Nature has played around with this dental design in various mammals and even some non-mammals throughout history, but Smilodon perfected it, taking the concept to an entirely new level. What made Smilodon's fangs special wasn't just their presence, but their sheer audacious length. We're talking about canines so long they protruded well beyond the lower jaw, a feature that was uncommon even among other saber-toothed cats. To put it in perspective, Smilodon's canines could grow up to 8 inches long. That's longer than many modern kitchen knives. They were precision instruments of prehistoric destruction. Shaped like deadly daggers with sharp points and smooth, narrow sides, these teeth were designed to pierce deep into flesh with devastating efficiency. Here's where things get really interesting. You'd expect a predator with teeth like that to have a powerful bite to match. But surprisingly, studies have shown that Smilodon's bite was relatively weak, only about 1,000 newtons, which is 4 times weaker than a modern lion's. So, how did it kill? Well, that's been a subject of much debate among paleontologists. One popular theory suggests that Smilodon was the original ambush predator. Picture this: a Smilodon hidden in dense vegetation, waiting for the perfect moment. Then, with a powerful leap, it pounces on its unsuspecting prey. Using those muscular forelimbs and grappling hook claws, it pins down its victim. With precision, it sinks its saber teeth into the prey's soft underbelly, causing massive internal damage and blood loss. But not everyone buys this gut-stabbing hypothesis. Many researchers favor a different but equally grim scenario. They propose that Smilodon used its powerful build to quickly overpower its prey, then delivered a precise lethal bite to the throat. This would have caused severe blood loss and suffocation, a quick, if not particularly pleasant end for its unfortunate victims. Adding fuel to this theory is the discovery that Smilodon could open its jaw to an incredible 120 degrees. That's almost twice as wide as a human can manage. With a gape like that, pretty much every neck in the Ice Age would have been fair game. But Smilodon wasn't just brawn and teeth. Brain scans of Smilodon skulls suggest that these prehistoric predators had excellent coordination, sharp hearing, and top-notch vision. Their eye socket shape hints at binocular vision, giving them the depth perception needed to judge distances accurately, crucial for a predator that relied on ambush tactics. And if all that wasn't enough, they were fast too. Many Smilodon fossils show trauma to their sternums, the kind of injury you'd expect from high-speed collisions. This suggests that not only were they quick on their feet, but they were also willing to risk life and limb, or at least a bruised chest, in pursuit of their next meal. Smilodon's unique traits, along with its powerful weaponry, made it a versatile hunter, capable of taking down a wide variety of megafaunal prey. The specific animals it targeted varied based on the region it called home. In North America, their prey included oversized versions of animals we recognize today: giant bison, camels, and, if the opportunity arose, even mastodons and Columbian mammoths. Yes, these cats were taking down creatures that dwarfed modern elephants. In South America, Smilodon's targets were equally impressive and diverse, including creatures like Toxodon, Leptopterna, various species of Glyptodont, along with more familiar animals such as horses and camelids. Some evidence even suggests that Smilodon occasionally went after caimans, cementing its status as a top predator. We know what Smilodon ate thanks to skeletal evidence, such as tooth marks on bones, or Smilodon remains found alongside those of their prey, providing vital clues about its diet. One big question that's still hotly debated in paleontology circles is whether Smilodon was a lone hunter or a team player. This isn't just academic curiosity. Knowing whether Smilodon hunted in packs could tell us a lot about its social structure and what kind of prey it typically targeted. One of the strongest pieces of evidence supporting the idea that Smilodons lived socially comes from the La Brea tar pits in California. These California tar pits are a gold mine for paleontologists, preserving countless Ice Age animals that got stuck in the sticky asphalt. But most of the bones found in La Brea aren't from herbivores. The La Brea tar pits, I've always found them haunting. Imagine being a massive herbivore, maybe a bison or a ground sloth, blundering into what looked like solid ground, only to find yourself hopelessly trapped. But the truly chilling part isn't just the herbivores caught in this prehistoric glue. It's the predators, like the saber-toothed cat, Smilodon, that also met their end there, often after being lured in by the promise of an easy meal. Smilodon fossils are incredibly common in these pits. Over 166,000 bones have been found. This sheer number has led some scientists to wonder if Smilodon wasn't more social than we typically imagine. The reasoning goes something like this. Social cat species today are more likely to respond to distress calls. So, if one Smilodon got stuck, its cries for help might have attracted others, who then also became trapped. It's a grim picture, I know, but it could explain the concentration of remains. There's another fascinating, almost touching clue suggesting possible social behavior. Some Smilodon fossils show evidence of severe injuries or disabilities that would have made hunting almost impossible. Yet, these individuals survived well into adulthood. This has led some paleontologists to propose something they call pseudo-healthcare among Smilodons. The idea is that injured cats were cared for by their fellow Smilodons, much like modern lions or wolves support injured members of their pride or pack. One famous example is a Smilodon fossil that shows signs of hip dysplasia from a young age, but still managed to survive to adulthood. It's difficult to imagine how such an animal could have hunted successfully on its own. It paints a heartwarming, if speculative, picture of Smilodon families looking after their own. Of course, not everyone is convinced by this Smilodon social club theory. Some researchers point out that Smilodon remains found outside of predator traps like La Brea tend to be more isolated. They argue that this suggests a more solitary lifestyle, more in line with many modern big cats. Regardless of whether Smilodon was a team player or a loner, one thing's for it was at the top of the food chain. But that doesn't mean it didn't have competition. The Ice Age was a time of giants, and Smilodon wasn't the only predator with an appetite for mammoth-sized meals. Two of Smilodon's biggest rivals were the American lion and the dire wolf. Now, If you're picturing the dire wolves from Game of Thrones, it's worth noting that while real dire wolves were impressive, they weren't quite as monstrous as their fictional counterparts. But they were formidable predators in their own right. Isotope analysis shows that they had a diet very similar to Smilodons. In other words, these predators were often competing for the same prey. So, how did Smilodon stack up against its competitors? Well, when it came to the American lion, it was probably a bit of a standoff. The American lion had size on its side, being one of the largest cats to ever exist. But Smilodon had those impressive canines, which likely served as a pretty effective deterrent. Most likely, these two apex predators tried to avoid each other when possible. But when conflicts did occur, it could have gone either way. The dire wolf, on the other hand, seems to have often come out second best in confrontations with Smilodon. Evidence from La Brea suggests that dire wolves would frequently abandon their kills when a Smilodon showed up. It's not hard to imagine why, given those sabers being on full display. Most predators would probably decide that discretion was the better part of valor, but lions and wolves weren't the only competition Smilodon had to worry about. The Ice Age was also the time of the short-faced bear, a beast that could make even Smilodon look small by comparison. Some of these bears reached truly dinosaurian proportions, rivaling medium-sized sauropods in weight. However, these ursine giants were more omnivorous than Smilodon, which likely reduced direct competition. Plus, bears tend to be solitary creatures, so if a group of Smilodons encountered one, the bear would likely have decided that this particular picnic basket wasn't worth the trouble. Now, we've talked a lot about Smilodon's impressive hunting adaptations, but there's one question we haven't addressed yet. How on earth did it eat with those ridiculous teeth? After all, those saber-like fangs seem like they would have been quite the obstacle during feeding. Well, Smilodon had a solution for that too. Unlike most predators that can chomp down from the front, Smilodon was equipped with specialized slicing teeth called carnassials. These teeth, situated on the sides of the mouth, worked like biological scissors, shearing through meat with ease. To eat, Smilodon would have turned its head to the side, using these carnassials to slice off manageable chunks of meat while its saber teeth stayed out of the way. If this eating style sounds familiar, that's because you might have seen it in action. Many modern cats, and even other predators, use a similar technique when tackling tough pieces of meat. It's a prime example of nature's problem-solving. When life gives you saber teeth, you adapt your eating style accordingly. With its unique adaptations and hunting prowess, Smilodon carved out a vast empire for itself. Between its three species, it achieved a distribution across the Western Hemisphere that would make any modern predator green with envy. In North America, S. gracilis and S. fatalis roamed from coast to coast, reaching as far north as Alberta, Canada. Meanwhile, in South America, S. fatalis and S. populator established a domain stretching all the way down to Patagonia. But Smilodon wasn't just geographically widespread. It was also adaptable. Fossils have been found in a diverse array of environments, from grasslands and plains to woodlands and closed forests, from savannas to subtropical forests, and even mammoth steppes. This adaptability allowed Smilodon to live alongside a veritable who's who of Pleistocene megafauna. We're talking about a world where you might encounter short-faced bears proboscideans, ground sloths the size of cars, armored glyptodonts, the rhino-like toxodon, camels, deer, horses, bison, and even terror birds. I sometimes imagine what it must have been like to walk through those ancient Ice Age landscapes. It's easy to picture the mammoths, those shaggy giants we all know. But they weren't the scariest things out there, not by a long shot. There was another creature, a biological battering ram that truly dominated. Imagine being one of the first humans to cross paths with Smilodon around 25,000 years ago. Armed with only primitive tools, you'd come face to face with a saber-toothed cat. The relationship between humans and Smilodon was likely tense. We were competing for the same food, and for our ancestors, only the larger Populator and Fatalis remained by the time they arrived. Bad timing indeed, given that Meganterion, a possible predecessor of Smilodon, occasionally preyed on Homo erectus. It's not hard to believe that Smilodon might have considered early humans as potential prey too. But humans are resourceful, and while there's no direct evidence of human-Smilodon confrontations, our superior technology and group tactics likely allowed us to turn the tables on these predators from time to time. In 2021, researchers discovered a petroglyph that seems to depict a group of humans observing a Smilodon from afar. It's a tantalizing glimpse into a world where our ancestors shared the landscape with these magnificent and terrifying creatures. But this coexistence wasn't to last. Smilodon disappeared from the face of the earth. The youngest remains of both Fatalis and Populator date back to around 10,000 years ago. About the same time that humans were figuring out agriculture, the extinction of Smilodon continues to fuel debate among paleontologists. Some argue that humans played a role in their demise, either through competition or by altering habitats. Others are less convinced. The more widely accepted theory points to the broader Quaternary extinction event as the primary cause. This was a period of significant climate change that saw the disappearance of many large animal species in North and South America. As the megafauna that Smilodon relied on for food began to die out, the saber-toothed predator found itself in an increasingly precarious position. The adaptations that had made Smilodon such a successful hunter of large prey became a liability. Specialized to take down giants, Smilodon struggled to adapt to a world where those giants were disappearing. It was too good at what it did, and when the world changed, it couldn't change with it. The extinction of Smilodon marked the end of an era. It was the last of the saber-toothed cats, not just in the Americas, but worldwide. With its passing, a lineage that had dominated the planet for over 20 million years came to an end. Its legacy, however, still resonates in museum exhibits, in our imaginations, and as a reminder of the fragile balance between species and their environments. As we face our own period of rapid change, the lesson of Smilodon is clear. Survival requires adaptation. Imagine a rhinoceros that decided regular size wasn't intimidating enough. Multiply that by roughly 3. Add the bulk of a small elephant and crown it with a single horn, so massive it could serve as a battering ram for medieval warfare. What you're picturing is still probably smaller than Elasmotherium. This wasn't just large, it was monumentally oversized. Standing 6.5 feet at the shoulder and stretching 15 feet from nose to tail, Elasmotherium weighed in at a staggering 5 tons of pure, horn-equipped muscle. But the mements alone don't capture the true horror of encountering this beast. The defining feature, the element that transformed Elasmotherium from merely large to genuinely nightmarish, was the horn. Not horns, plural like its modern rhinoceros descendants, but a single massive horn that could reach lengths of up to 6 feet. 6 feet of solid pointed bone jutting from the center of its forehead like some prehistoric unicorn's fever dream. And unlike the mammoth's curved tusks, which were primarily tools for foraging and occasional defense, Elasmotherium's horn was purpose-built for devastation. It was perfectly positioned for charging attacks, designed to concentrate the full force of 5 tons of angry herbivore into a single armor-piercing point. Any creature unfortunate enough to find itself on the receiving end of an Elasmotherium charge wasn't just facing injury, it was facing obliteration. The horn was just the beginning. Strip away that intimidating weapon, and you're still left with a creature that redefined what it meant to be perfectly adapted for the Ice Age. I've often thought about the creatures that were simply built to dominate their world. Elasmotherium, to me, embodies that idea perfectly. While mammoths struggled to survive in frozen conditions, Elasmotherium was purpose-built for the harsh realities of that world. It wasn't just survival, it was thriving in conditions that left other megafauna struggling. The legs alone tell a story. Unlike the mammoth's thick, pillar-like limbs suited for slow movement, Elasmotherium had legs that were both powerful and surprisingly agile. They were the foundation of a charging mechanism that could accelerate tons of muscle and bone into a thundering charge, flattening anything in its path. Elasmotherium's mass was front-loaded, designed to turn every charge into a catastrophic collision. Shoulder muscles absorbed the shock of high-speed impacts, and its digestive system extracted maximum nutrition from the sparse grasses. The skull, built like a natural helmet, could withstand impacts that would have been fatal to others, turning the entire head into a weapon system. It was a solitary predator's nightmare, capable of defending resources and territory through sheer individual dominance. Mammoths huddled together, but Elasmotherium stood alone because nothing posed a credible threat. And then there's the horn. Up to 6 feet long and weighing up to 100 pounds, it could punch through ice, tree trunks, and anything else in its path. That's a horn longer than a standard parking space is wide. Unlike modern rhinoceroses, which carry their horns on their snouts, Elasmotherium's horn was mounted directly on the forehead, the optimal position for delivering devastating charging attacks. It became the leading edge of a multi-ton projectile moving at considerable speed. The horn wasn't just a weapon. Its broad, sturdy base served as a snowplow, allowing the creature to clear feeding areas inaccessible to other herbivores. The keratin covering was constantly growing and self-sharpening. Unlike antlers that shed annually, this horn was a permanent, ever-improving tool. Recent fossil evidence even suggests some specimens had horn bases that could have supported structures up to 8 feet long. Imagine encountering something that could impale you from that distance. The horn didn't just change how Elasmotherium fought, it changed how everything else on the Ice Age landscape had to live. It was domination made manifest. While mammoths adapted to environments that barely tolerated them, Elasmotherium claimed territories that actively welcomed their dominance. The key difference wasn't just what they could survive, but what they could control. The Eurasian steppe during that time seemed designed specifically for creatures like Elasmotherium. I've always been fascinated by the mysteries of extinction, the sudden vanishing of creatures that once dominated the earth. Elasmotherium's story is one that has particularly haunted me. Imagine a 5-ton rhinoceros, armored with a 6-foot horn, ruling the Ice Age. How could something so seemingly indestructible simply disappear? It's a question that has plagued paleontologists for decades. For a creature built like a living battering ram, the occasional river valleys and scattered patches of woodland must have been paradise. No dense forests to navigate, no steep terrain to negotiate, just endless expanses of territory where speed, power, and intimidation ruled supreme. What makes Elasmotherium's territorial dominance truly remarkable is that they weren't just surviving in these conditions, they were thriving in areas where other megafauna couldn't establish permanent populations. The frozen steppes of Siberia, the windswept plains of Kazakhstan, the harsh grasslands of Central Asia, these were Elasmotherium's hunting grounds. These were territories where the combination of extreme cold, sparse vegetation, and brutal competition eliminated most other large herbivores. The secret, I believe, lay in their approach to resource management. While mammoth herds required vast areas to support their numbers, moving constantly to find sufficient food, Elasmotherium operated on a different principle entirely. They were territorial specialists, claiming specific ranges and defending them with an aggressive efficiency that made migration unnecessary. That horn wasn't just a weapon. It was a property deed written in bone and enforced through violence. Consider the advantages this gave them during the harshest periods of the Ice Age. When food became scarce and competition intensified, mammoth herds had to keep moving, constantly searching for new feeding grounds while burning precious calories in the process. Elasmotherium simply cleared their territory of competitors and settled in for the long haul. They could access buried vegetation that other creatures couldn't reach, defend prime feeding areas that others couldn't claim, and maintain energy reserves that migration-dependent species couldn't match. The fossil record tells a story of creatures that weren't just surviving, they were prospering. Elasmotherium remains have been found across a range that stretched from Ukraine to Mongolia, a distribution that suggests not desperate wandering, but successful territorial expansion. These weren't refugees from climate change. They were the landlords of the Ice Age, collecting rent in the form of exclusive access to the best grazing areas. And unlike mammoth populations, which fluctuated dramatically with environmental changes, Elasmotherium populations remained relatively stable throughout their existence. This wasn't luck. It was the natural result of a survival strategy so effective that it made them nearly immune to the environmental press that devastated other megafauna. For a creature so perfectly adapted to Ice Age conditions, so dominant in its chosen environment, and so well equipped for survival, Elasmotherium's extinction presents one of paleontology's most perplexing mysteries. How do you eliminate something that appeared virtually indestructible? While mammoths managed to survive in various forms until roughly 4,000 years ago, with some populations persisting on isolated islands well into human civilization, Elasmotherium vanished from the fossil record around 39,000 years ago. This wasn't a gradual decline. It was a sudden, complete disappearance that left no descendants and precious few clues about what could have overwhelmed such a formidable creature. The conventional explanation points to climate change, but this theory has some serious problems. Elasmotherium had already survived multiple ice ages, numerous warming periods, and dramatic environmental shifts throughout its history. These were creatures that had proven themselves capable of adapting to changing conditions over millions of years. Why would this particular climate shift prove fatal when so many previous ones had been survived? Some researchers suggest human hunting preyers, but again, the evidence doesn't quite add up. While humans were certainly present in Elasmotherium's range during the late Pleistocene, the idea that early human populations could have systematically eliminated creatures this large and dangerous seems optimistic at best. Remember, we're talking about 5-ton animals armed with 6-foot horns and the temperament of a cornered badger. Even with primitive weapons, the cost-benefit analysis of hunting such creatures seems questionable. The most disturbing possibility is that Elasmotherium's very dominance contributed to its downfall. Their territorial nature, while advantageous during stable periods, may have prevented them from adapting to rapidly changing conditions. Unlike mammoths, which could migrate to more favorable areas, Elasmotherium populations may have been too committed to their territories to abandon them when conditions deteriorated. But here's the truly unsettling part. The disappearance was so complete that for centuries, scientists weren't even Elasmotherium had existed at all. Unlike mammoth remains, which are found regularly and in excellent condition, Elasmotherium fossils are rare and often fragmentary. It's almost as if something deliberately erased them from the archaeological record. Recent discoveries have added new layers to this mystery. Some fossils show evidence of stress markers and nutritional deficiencies that suggest the final populations were struggling with environmental press. Others display unusual growth patterns that might indicate disease or genetic problems. The picture emerging is of a species that didn't just disappear. It collapsed suddenly and catastrophically. Taken together, the evidence paints a grim picture. Whatever eliminated Elasmotherium was powerful enough to bring down a creature that had reigned unchallenged for ages, resilient, dominant, and built to endure. And yet, it vanished with barely a trace. For an animal that once defined the Ice Age landscape, the silence surrounding its extinction is genuinely haunting. The mammoth survival story, impressive as it is, suddenly seems less like triumph and more like luck. They weren't necessarily better adapted, perhaps simply more fortunate. Elasmotherium wasn't just another Ice Age animal. It was the pinnacle of prehistoric power. A creature so finely tuned to its environment that it redefined what dominance looked like. The mammoth may have gotten the fame, but Elasmotherium earned the title that mattered most, the real titan of the Ice Age. But Elasmotherium wasn't the only behemoth history forgot. While it ruled the frozen steppes, another titan far to the south was the definition of giant altogether, bigger than a mammoth, heavier than a T-Rex, and possibly the largest land mammal to ever walk the earth. When we envision the world that shaped our earliest ancestors, I think we typically imagine a landscape dominated by predators. Saber-toothed cats stalking the savanna, massive hyenas lurking near waterholes, and early humans huddled around fires for protection. But what if one of the most significant competitors our ancestors faced wasn't a carnivore at all, but another primate? One so massive it would tower over any human alive today. Meet Dinopithecus ingens, the terrible ape of Pleistocene Africa. Standing over 1.5 meters or around 5 feet tall when upright and weighing up to 150 kilograms or 330 pounds, it was nearly 5 times heavier than today's largest baboons. These colossal primates shared the African landscape with Australopithecus, an early Homo species, between roughly 3 to 2 million years ago. Yet, despite their imposing presence during this pivotal chapter of prehistory, they remain virtually unknown outside of specialized scientific circles. Dinopithecus belongs to the family Cercopithecidae, the Old World monkeys, rather than the hominoid family. Specifically, it's classified within the subfamily Papionini, alongside modern baboons, geladas, and mangabes. Despite this taxonomic distance from humans, Dinopithecus represents one of the most remarkable examples of primate gigantism in the fossil record. The genus first entered scientific literature in 1938 when paleontologist Robert Broom described Dinopithecus ingens based on fossil remains from Sterkfontein, near Pretoria, South Africa. The name itself tells a story. Dino, from the Greek for terrible or fearfully great. Pithecus, meaning ape or monkey, and ingens, meaning huge in Latin. A fitting title for a creature that pushed the boundaries of what we thought primates could become. Subsequent discoveries have primarily come from cave sites in South Africa, including Krumdraai and Cooper's Cave, locations famously associated with early hominin remains. Fossil evidence includes partial skulls, mandibles, and postcranial elements that allow paleontologists to reconstruct its appearance and lifestyle. Most fossils date between 3 and 2 million years ago, placing Dinopithecus firmly in the Pliocene epoch alongside early Australopithecus and Homo species. Physically, Dinopithecus was a scaled-up baboon built for terrestrial power. Its skull alone made up to 30 centimeters in males and featured an elongated muzzle, enlarged canines, and a prominent sagittal crest for anchoring massive jaw muscles, indicators of both feeding strength and male-male competition. The mandible was exceptionally robust, with a deep body adapted to handle powerful chewing forces far beyond what is seen in modern baboons. Dental analysis shows a heavy emphasis on grinding plant material. Large molars with thick enamel point to a diet that included fibrous vegetation, seeds, and tubers, foods that required prolonged mastication. These adaptations suggest Dinopithecus could exploit tough resources that smaller primates couldn't process efficiently, offering a survival edge in diverse or fluctuating environments. Still, for all that chewing power, it needed a body that could carry the weight, literally. Though fossilized postcranial remains are fragmentary, they leave no doubt. This was a ground dweller built like a fortress. The bones are dense, the muscle attachments oversized, and the proportions suggest a primate that moved low and heavy. It wasn't agile, but it didn't need to be. It was stable, durable, a 4-limbed tank that could traverse both woodland and savanna. Now, Here's where the social structure gets fascinating. Sexual dimorphism in Dinopithecus was extreme, even more pronounced than in modern baboons. Males may have weighed up to twice as much as females and bore significantly larger canines and cranial crests. This suggests intense male competition, likely involving physical confrontations and dominance displays. A social structure where size directly translated to reproductive success. Yet all this leaves Dinopithecus somewhere in the middle of its ecosystem. Its size positioned it as a mesopredator, both hunter and hunted. It likely fed on fruits, seeds, roots, and small animals, while remaining vulnerable to apex predators like saber-toothed cats or large hyenas. Its bulk, strength, and potential for aggressive defense would have made it a formidable opponent, one that early hominins may have respected, avoided, or even competed with. Modern baboons are notoriously territorial, confrontational, and quick to violence when threatened. And Dinopithecus almost certainly took that to the extreme. With large, dominant males leading the charge, a threatened troop could have erupted into an explosion of noise, displays, and physical retaliation. Raised hackles, deafening vocalizations, and jaw-clapping would have been the first warning. But if that didn't work, those massive canines weren't just for show. A provoked Dinopithecus, especially a protective male, could have delivered devastating bites and powerful strikes capable of injuring or killing mid-sized predators. Some paleontologists estimate Dinopithecus could have delivered bite forces comparable to those of big cats, perhaps reaching or even exceeding 2,000 pounds of crushing force. I find myself captivated by the image of a primate that didn't back down easily, a creature that simply didn't need to. Weighing up to 150 kilograms, bristling with muscle and rage, a defensive circle of these primates would have been a serious deterrent to large carnivores and even early hominins. This was Dinopithecus, and its story is one of survival in a changing world. During the time when Dinopithecus thrived, South Africa was undergoing dramatic climatic shifts. The forests were slowly giving way to open woodlands and grasslands. For a primate of such exceptional size, these changes presented both challenges and opportunities. Fossil sites suggest that Dinopithecus inhabited a mosaic landscape, a mix of open savanna, woodlands, and riverine forests, environments not unlike those favored by modern baboons. Life for Dinopithecus likely mirrored that of modern baboons, but on a far more intimidating scale. These multi-male, multi-female groups were probably structured around rigid dominance hierarchies. Adult males asserted their rank through visual displays and, when necessary, brutal physical confrontations. Imagine clashes between males weighing up to 150 kilos, anything but subtle. Adult males likely positioned themselves on the outskirts of the troop, forming a living barrier against potential predators. At dawn, the group would descend from cliffs or tall trees, safe havens used to avoid nocturnal hunters. From there, the day began with movement and, of course, a lot of eating. Feeding likely consumed much of the daylight hours. Adult males may have needed up to 7 kilograms of plant matter daily. Grasses, seeds, fruits, bulbs, tubers, all requiring tremendous chewing power. And while plants formed the base of their diet, they weren't strictly herbivores. Like their modern relatives, Dinopithecus likely supplemented their diet with animal protein, small vertebrates, insects, scavenged carcasses, But here's a twist. With their size and strength, they may have taken things further. Juvenile antelope or the young of larger prey animals weren't out of the question. And when it came to disputed carcasses, their sheer bulk may have been enough to intimidate other predators into backing off. Much like modern papillons, Dinopithecus likely relied on a rich set of vocalizations, facial cues, body postures, and physical contact. With brains scaled to their size and complex social structures to manage, their interactions were probably just as nuanced, broadcasting everything from individual rank to predator warnings with a glance or a grunt. Perhaps the most compelling aspect of Dinopithecus is its temporal and geographic overlap with early human species. Between approximately 3 and 2 million years ago, as Dinopithecus roamed the South African landscape, the hominin presence was undergoing a period of remarkable change. Species like Australopithecus were being joined by early Homo. Upright walking had become well established, brain sizes were growing, and the first stone tools were appearing. This was the crucible of humanity, and Dinopithecus was there to witness it. The fossil evidence places Dinopithecus in association with hominin remains at several critical sites. At Swartkrans and Cooper's Cave in South Africa's Cradle of Humankind, Dinopithecus fossils have been found in the same deposits as Australopithecus robustus and early Homo specimens. This wasn't just proximity across a landscape. These primates inhabited the same immediate environments, drank from the same water sources, sheltered in the same cave systems, and likely observed each other regularly. The size disparity alone would have created a power imbalance. Early hominins stood approximately 1.2 to 1.5 meters tall and weighed between 30 to 55 kilograms. They would have been significantly outmatched by adult male Dinopithecus, which averaged around 80 kilograms, with larger individuals reaching up to 150 kilograms. Armed with formidable canines and superior upper body strength, even the smaller female Dinopithecus would have presented a physical threat. Competition for resources was inevitable. Both groups were omnivorous with overlapping dietary preferences, though with different specializations. Early hominins were developing adaptations for a more versatile diet, including meat obtained through scavenging and possibly hunting, while Dinopithecus likely specialized in efficiently processing large quantities of plant materials. Nevertheless, both would have sought out the same high-value food resources, fruits, nuts, tubers, and water sources, creating potential conflict points. And it wasn't just diet that brought them into contact. Both groups favored mosaic environments, offering a mix of woodlands for shelter and open areas for foraging. Both likely needed trees or cliff faces for nighttime safety from predators. Both would have been drawn to reliable water sources, particularly during dry seasons. This shared preference for similar habitats would have ended regular encounters between the species. The responses of early hominins to Dinopithecus were likely complex and situational. Direct competition was probably avoided when possible, with hominins developing greater behavioral flexibility to compensate for their physical disadvantage. This might have included adjusting activity patterns to avoid peak Dinopithecus feeding times, developing more efficient foraging strategies, or utilizing tools to access food resources unavailable to even the powerful Dinopithecus. One intriguing possibility is that the presence of Dinopithecus may have accelerated hominin tool use and cooperation. When confronted with larger, more physically imposing competitors, our ancestors, the landscape that Dinopithecus and early hominins shared must have been intense. I imagine our ancestors felt pressed to find any advantage they could, developing tools, strengthening social bonds, cracking nuts with stones, digging for tubers with sharpened sticks, coordinating defense. These would have been crucial skills when you're sharing space with mega-monkeys. And then there were the predators. Dinopithecus and early hominins faced similar threats. Big cats, hyenas, crocodiles. It's a strange thought, but a troop of Dinopithecus might have offered some protection to the hominins nearby. Predators might have been less likely to attack if they had to deal with a large, aggressive group of monkeys. Of course, it could have worked the other way, too. A small group of hominins could have attracted predators, drawing them closer to the Dinopithecus. But Dinopithecus eventually vanished around 1.6 to 1.8 million years ago. Climate change likely played a big role. Expanding grasslands and shrinking woodlands disrupted their food supply and shelter. Smaller, more adaptable baboons may have also outcompeted them. And then came Homo erectus, with more advanced tools, broader diets, and needs that overlapped with Dinopithecus. Resource competition intensified. Predation dynamics shifted too. New carnivores increased the risks, especially for the young ones. Disease might have played a part as well. Socially cohesive species are often vulnerable to outbreaks. The very things that made Dinopithecus successful, their large size, slow reproduction, specialized diet, may have ultimately led to their downfall. Their extinction reflects a broader trend of large-bodied species disappearing during that time. Not a sudden collapse, but a gradual decline under press. I was reading about another creature that vanished, though much later. In ancient Greece, it was known as Inoxian dirus, the terrible wolf. It was said this creature was so dominant and ferocious that even the largest prehistoric animals feared it. It had jaws that could tear through the flesh and bones of a mammoth. It struck fear into the hearts of all who crossed its path. It's the dire wolf. Dire wolves were apex predators, known for their meat-heavy diet and hunting skills. Their teeth were unique, with distinct posterior cuspids and transverse crests. Their digestive systems were optimized for meat, with short intestines. Their skeletons were robust, with powerful limbs and a broad chest, hinting at their strength. And their bite force was incredible, among the strongest of any canid, allowing them to take down formidable prey. They roamed across diverse landscapes, the plains of North America, the savannas of South America, and the steppes of Eastern Asia. In North America, they hunted bison, Pleistocene horses, and large ground sloths. In South America, they feasted on ground sloths, glyptodonts, toxodons, mastodons, and extinct camels. In Eastern Asia, they faced woolly mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, steppe bison, and wild horses. They competed with other predators like Xenocheon, Smilodon, the American lion, and the giant short-faced bear. At La Brea, they clashed with predators and scavengers amidst trapped herbivores. They even outnumbered gray wolves 5-1, showing their resilience in challenging environments. They lived in monogamous pairs and hunted in packs. displaying fierce determination and adaptability. Their hunting strategies, tooth breakage rates, and pack dynamics offer insights into their evolutionary success. With their hunting skills, adaptability, and ferocity, the dire wolf was a true ruler of the food chain. But where did they come from? The origin of the dire wolf has been debated by scientists. One theory suggests they evolved from an expansion of the genus Canis from Eurasia. Another theory suggests they emerged from an ancestral lineage native to the Americas, separate from the genus Canis. Recent genetic analysis has shed new light on this. Back in 1992, scientists tried to extract mitochondrial DNA from the remains of Anocian dius gilda, a close relative of modern wolves. But tar from the La Brea pits stubbornly clung to the bone, thwarting their efforts. Finally, in 2021, scientists obtained nuclear DNA from 5 dire wolf fossils. These discoveries revealed that dire wolves represent a unique genetic lineage that split from wolf-like canines a staggering 5.7 million years ago. This supports the theory that they evolved from an ancestral lineage native to the Americas, distinct from the genus Canis. Despite the similarity in their skeletons, dire wolves and gray wolves are not closely related. This is likely due to convergent evolution, where different species independently develop similar traits. The dire wolf stands out as a truly unique species within the canine world, separate from modern gray wolves. The story of the dire wolf spans an impressive 40 million years. It all began with the arrival of the canid family in North America. From fox-like vulpini to dog-like canini, the branches of their family tree are so diverse, and the variations are truly intriguing. I've seen the dire wolf fossils discovered in so many different habitats: plains, grasslands, forested mountain areas, even arid savannas across North and South America. The La Brea tar pits in Los Angeles and Tule Springs in Nevada are particularly abundant with these fossils, while dire wolf remains are less common at higher latitudes in North America. The recent discoveries of Asian dire wolf fossils really challenge what we previously thought about their range. Fossils have been reported in various states, with major sites east of the Rocky Mountains. They've been found in Mexico, especially in the San Jose Cave and El Chidazo, and in South America. Specimens dated to less than 17,000 years ago have turned up in Venezuela, Peru, Bolivia, Chile, and Ecuador. The 2020 discovery of a dire wolf fossil in northeastern China suggests a migration route from mid-latitude North America across Beringia into Eurasia. This challenges previous assumptions about the barriers to their dispersal. Understanding the physical characteristics of dire wolves really sheds light on their remarkable adaptations. They were similar in proportion to modern North American wolves, like the Yukon wolf, but they had variations in size and morphology. Some Rancho La Brea specimens were smaller than the largest northern wolves we see today, but others were actually larger. Compared to modern wolves of similar body size, the dire wolf had smaller feet and a larger head. Their massive skull had broader dimensions and a higher sagittal crest. Geographic differences were observed, with specimens from California and Mexico showing distinct craniodental features and limb proportions compared to those east of the Continental Divide. Some had shorter, lighter limbs, making them less adapted for running than timber wolves and coyotes, while others possess longer limbs comparable to the Yukon wolf. 125,000 years ago, dire wolves roamed the earth during the Sangamonian interglacial period when the sea level was 8 meters higher than today. The Wisconsin glacial period followed, lasting from 80,000 to 20,000 years ago, the Ice Age, with glaciers covering much of North America. And then, about 9,500 years ago, the dire wolves went extinct. That marked the end of a unique era. Research indicates that dire wolves evolved separately from modern North American gray wolves and coyotes, without any genetic mixing. The reasons for their extinction are still debated, but it likely involved climate change, competition with other predators, and changes in prey availability. The disappearance of dire wolves marked the end of a unique lineage within the Canidae family, and it potentially altered predator-prey dynamics at the time. Between 125,000 and 9,500 years ago, the climatic shifts that occurred must have shaped the environment in which dire wolves lived. These changes, alongside fluctuations in prey populations, likely influenced their survival. They existed in diverse habitats, from grasslands to forests, and as apex predators, they played a crucial role in regulating ecosystems. Their extinction represented a loss of biodiversity. While interbreeding is common among wolf-like canines, studies haven't found any evidence of genetic mixing between dire wolves and extant North American gray wolves or coyotes, suggesting independent evolution. The exact reasons for their extinction remain a subject of debate, with climate change, competition, and changes in prey availability likely playing a role. When I reflect on the era of the dire wolf, I am captivated by their formidable presence and powerful bite force. But in the grand tapestry of Earth's history, few chapters are as captivating as the rise and fall of the dinosaurs. These magnificent creatures dominated our planet for over 160 million years. But as the curtain fell on the age of reptiles, it gave way to an unexpected sequel. Enter the forest wrasses, more commonly known as the terror birds. These feathered nightmares emerged from the ashes of the dinosaur extinction, carrying the torch of their terrifying predecessors. Roughly 53 million years ago, in the early Eocene, the world was a very different place. A hothouse Earth with lush forests stretching from pole to pole, filled with a diverse range of life forms that emerged after the extinction of the dinosaurs. It was in this steamy, prehistoric paradise that the first terror bird, Paleopsilopterus, made its debut. Standing at a modest height of 1 meter, this Brazilian bird might not have seemed particularly terrifying at first glance. It was about the same size as a modern-day stork. But appearances can be deceiving, and Paleopsilopterus had something its contemporaries lacked: potential. What set it apart was its agility and speed, traits that would become hallmarks of its descendants. While it may not have been the apex predator of its time, dwarfed by monstrous crocodilians and giant snakes, it was a harbinger of things to come. I often wonder what the early mammals of Europe thought when a South American terror bird first appeared. Imagine their surprise seeing this exotic predator, a taste of something utterly new in their familiar lands. That bird was Eleutherornis, and it's the only terror bird whose fossils have been found outside the Americas, specifically in France and Switzerland. But even as Eleutherornis was making its mark, nature had even grander designs for these avian predators. Just 3 million years after Paleopsilus took its first steps, Eleutherornis emerged, already 50% taller than its ancestor. And that was just the beginning. The terror birds continued to evolve, to grow, to diversify. It was as if they were in competition with themselves, each new species trying to outdo its predecessors. The Oligocene epoch, from about 34 to 23 million years ago, saw the emergence of true giants, birds that would have given even the bravest prey pause. Take Paraphysornis, a Brazilian bird that stood 1.4 meters tall and weighed a whopping 180 kilograms. That's heavier than the largest living bird today, the ostrich. This wasn't some lightweight contender. Paraphysornis was built like a feathered tank. Paleontologists believe it hunted with powerful kicks, slashes, and jabs with its sharp beak, a prehistoric version of mixed martial arts. And Paraphysornis wasn't just a brute. Studies of terror bird brain cases suggest they had well-developed visual and auditory centers, making them formidable hunters. But even Paraphysornis was just setting the stage. The true giants came later, in the Miocene and Pliocene epochs, from about 23 to 2.5 million years ago. These were creatures that pushed the boundaries of what it meant to be a bird, reaching sizes that rivaled the predatory dinosaurs of old. 3 names stand out: Titanus, Kelenken, and Brontornis. Titanus, the youngest and smallest of the trio, was also the most adventurous. It crossed the newly formed land bridge connecting North and South America, becoming the only large South American predator to establish itself in North America, living in what is now the United States. It stood 2 meters tall, an imposing sight for the mammals of North America. But as impressive as Titanus was, it was dwarfed by its cousins back in South America. Kelenken, named after a mythological Tehuelche spirit, stood a towering 3 meters tall and weighed around 250 kilograms. This was a bird the size of a grizzly bear, with a head larger than that of a horse and a beak that could crush bone. Recent studies have shown that Kelenken and other large terror birds possessed a unique skull structure that gave them increased bite force and pecking power. The title of the largest terror bird is still debated, with Brontornis giving Kelenken a run for its money. While slightly shorter at 2.8 meters, Brontornis was built like a feathered bulldozer, potentially weighing up to 400 kilograms. This made it not just the heaviest terror bird, but also the heaviest carnivorous bird of all time. Interestingly, some paleontologists have questioned whether Brontornis was truly a terror bird or even a carnivore at all. However, recent studies have identified features in Brontornis vertebrae that are unique to terror birds, lending weight to its classification as a member of this fearsome family. Whether it was a true terror bird or not, its massive size would have made it a force to be reckoned with. It may have been slower than its more nimble cousins, but what it lacked in speed, it made up for in raw power. Terror birds. The name alone conjures images of a prehistoric nightmare, a giant flightless bird with a massive beak, capable of steamrolling over any prey. But while their size and power were certainly key to their dominance, many terror birds took a different approach: speed. Studies of their leg bones reveal a structure remarkably similar to that of modern-day ostriches, and paleontologists estimate that some of the larger species could have reached speeds exceeding 30 miles, imagine that, faster than Usain Bolt, but twice as tall and weighing several times as much. But speed wasn't just about chasing prey. For many terror birds, especially the smaller ones, it was a crucial defensive adaptation. In a world filled with giant carnivorous mammals and enormous crocodilians, a quick getaway could mean the difference between life and death. Their true power, though, lay in their highly developed senses. Recent studies of terror bird skulls have revealed sensory capabilities far beyond many of their contemporaries. Their eyes were well developed and positioned to provide excellent depth perception. They were equally adept at seeing in bright daylight and the dim light of dawn and dusk, making them effective hunters around the clock. The inner ear structure of terror birds suggests an acute sensitivity to low-frequency sounds. This would have allowed them to detect the footsteps of potential prey, even when hidden by dense vegetation. Imagine one standing motionless in the prehistoric forests of South America, head cocked slightly to one side. To a casual observer, it might appear to be resting, but in reality, its incredibly sensitive ears are picking up the faintest rustle of leaves. It's no wonder these birds dominated their ecosystems for millions of years. But even the mightiest rulers face their downfall. For millions of years, these avian predators had ruled supreme in South America, developing into a diverse array of species. But somewhere along the line, their luck ran out. Traditionally, the extinction of the terror birds was linked to the Great American Interchange, about 2.7 million years ago, when the Isthmus of Panama created a land bridge between North and South America. The conventional wisdom held that the influx of new predators from North America outcompeted the terror birds, leading to their extinction. It was a neat and tidy explanation that seemed to make perfect sense. However, as is often the case in science, the truth has turned out to be more complex and nuanced. Recent studies have cast doubt on this simple competition-based extinction model, revealing a more intricate tapestry of factors that led to the terror bird's downfall. One of the primary challenges to the competition hypothesis comes from a closer examination of the fossil record. It turns out that most terror birds had already disappeared long before placental predators arrived in South America in significant numbers. This timing mismatch suggests that something else was at play. Moreover, the success of Titanus in North America serves as a counterpoint to the idea that terror birds couldn't compete with placental mammals. Not only did Titanus successfully expand its range northward during the interchange, but it also managed to coexist with large canids and felines for millions of years. Clearly, at least some terror birds were more than capable of holding their own against mammalian predators. So, if competition alone didn't doom the terror birds, what did? The answer, as is often the case in paleontology, likely involves a complex interplay of factors. Climate change, in particular, may have played a significant role. From the Oligocene to the Pliocene, Earth's climate was on a long-term cooling trend, culminating in a series of ice ages. This global cooling would have had a profound impact on the ecosystems that terror birds called home. As temperatures dropped and habitats changed, the lush forests that many terror bird species relied on would have given way to more open landscapes. The idea that terror birds survived almost to the cusp of human arrival in South America. It's a thought that stayed with me. Just 18,000 years ago, an unidentified species might have still roamed. What would it have been like if our ancestors had actually encountered these feathered giants? Could the legends of giant birds in South American folklore have some basis in reality? It's unlikely humans directly interacted with them, but the possibility that stories were passed down through generations, that's not entirely far-fetched. Other megafauna, like woolly mammoths and giant ground sloths, certainly left lasting impressions on human culture. This near miss reminds me of the incredible diversity of life that has existed on our planet. It's sobering to think that if terror birds had hung on just a few thousand years longer, our understanding of the natural world might be very different today. Of course, other creatures inspire awe, too. In the thick forests of the past, the Tyrannosaurus rex was the top predator. Its seismic movements and razor-sharp teeth. It's always been regarded as the pinnacle of prehistoric might. Even today, its reputation endures as the most frightening being to have ever walked the planet. So, just how terrifying was the T-Rex, actually? It all started in 1902 in Montana, when Barnum Brown, a paleontologist, discovered the first known fragment of a T-Rex skeleton. This discovery sparked a new era in dinosaur research. Major finds since then have offered invaluable information on the morphology, behavior, and scientific significance of Tyrannosaurus rex, particularly the virtually complete specimen Sioux, discovered in South Dakota. Researchers have pieced together the history of this giant predator and its role as an apex predator during the late Cretaceous period through thorough excavation, evaluation, and reconstruction. T-Rex and other large theropod dinosaurs like Tarbosaurus and Daspletosaurus are classified as members of the subfamily Tyrannosaurinae. Within the family Tyrannosauridae, Tyrannosaurus rex represents the top predators of the late Cretaceous era and is a key figure in the evolution of dinosaurs. Stretching to insane lengths, T-Rex boasted a muscular body that could extend up to 12 meters. That's about the size of a typical school bus. Some paleontological speculation suggests certain specimens exceeded 13 meters, dwarfing any contemporary terrestrial predator. This imposing giant rose to a height of 6 meters at the hips. Imagine this enormously tall creature, with powerful legs bearing the weight of its massive frame, its head lifted high as it surveyed its realm with regal authority. Estimates suggest that a T-Rex could weigh anywhere from 12 to 18 tons, with its skin and flesh covering its massive bones. That's similar to the weight of several small cars compressed into the form of one awe-inspiring predator. The Tyrannosaurus rex boasted a sturdy skeletal structure with a distinct vertebral column comprised of neck, back, and sacral vertebrae. Though the exact number of tail vertebrae varied, its neck formed a muscular S-shaped curve supporting its massive head, while pneumatic depressions and robust neural spines provided strength and flexibility. The forelimbs were short with 2 clawed fingers, contrasting the long hind limbs, contributing to its imposing stature. The pelvis featured a lengthy ilium and a large pubic boot, while the hind foot had an arctometatarsalien metatarsus. Throughout its skeleton, many bones were hollowed, reducing weight without sacrificing strength. The Tyrannosaurus rex possessed skulls reaching up to 1.54 meters in length. That's about the size of an adult human. The skulls of Tyrannosaurus rex featured large fenestrae, reducing weight. I find myself picturing these massive, yet fused bones, almost like a puzzle pieced together over millennia. They had pneumatized components, and all this contributed to a bite force that dwarfed other non-tyrannosaurids. It's fascinating how evolution shapes even the most terrifying of creatures. The upper jaw had a U-shaped tip, which allowed for a more efficient extraction of tissue and bone with each bite, though this did put more stress on the front teeth. The teeth themselves were remarkable. In the upper jaw, they had prominent ridges and tips that curled backward like cutting tools. This heterodonty, as it's called, is quite distinct. The remaining teeth were robust and spaced, resembling, as some have described them, lethal bananas. Mature individuals sported larger teeth in the upper jaw than the lower. The largest tooth ever discovered measured a staggering 30.5 centimeters in length, and there were numerous small openings in both jaws, hinting at potential sensory functions or perhaps external structures. Despite the T-Rex's fearsome reputation for its massive jaws and teeth, I can't help but be drawn to its disproportionately small arms. For a long time, they were considered useless vestiges, but some paleontologists, like Stephen Stanley, suggest they were anything but. He proposed they were lethal weapons used in hand-to-hand combat. Imagine these 3-foot-long limbs, tipped with crescent-shaped claws, sharpened to razor edges. Picture the T-Rex advancing, its huge head looming, while its strong front limbs made rapid slashing movements, cutting through tissue and muscle with frightening accuracy. It paints a new picture of how the T-Rex hunted, showing a skill in quickly immobilizing its prey. No longer seen as useless like wisdom teeth in humans or wings on flightless birds, these arms are now recognized as crucial weapons. The Jurassic Park movies often portray the Tyrannosaurus rex as having poor eyesight, easily fooled by stillness. But recent scientific findings challenge this cinematic depiction. Paleontologists, through comparative anatomy and fossil evidence, theorize that the T-Rex likely had vision akin to modern predators like hawks. They could detect both moving and stationary objects. It deepens our understanding of its sensory capabilities. Some believe it was an adept ambush predator, using its size, powerful jaws, and heightened senses to swiftly hunt prey. Others see it as a scavenger, feeding on carrion. These differing views underscore the complexity of the T-Rex's behavior and its ecological role. Beyond its eyesight, the Tyrannosaurus rex also possessed a remarkable sense of smell, much like vultures today. This allowed it to spot objects up to 6 kilometers away under ideal conditions. It could detect prey from a distance and pursue its targets at speeds reaching 25 miles per hour, comparable to Usain Bolt's world record sprinting speed. Imagine yourself in that primeval environment, the noises of the woods echoing around you. Then a tremendous noise stops you in your tracks. The Tyrannosaurus rex is approaching, your heart races, you sprint, desperately trying to escape, but the earth trembles as the T-Rex closes in. You glance back and see its massive silhouette, the sun glinting off its sharp teeth. Realizing to no escape, the T-Rex's jaws close. 50 to 60 teeth, each as big as a banana, pierce your skin, sending waves of agony through your body. In that moment, you experience the true terror of being hunted by the most formidable predator to ever roam the earth. The feeding habits and diet of the Tyrannosaurus rex were integral to its dominance during the late Cretaceous period. With its massive size and powerful jaws filled with serrated teeth, it was a fearsome carnivore. Its diet primarily consisted of large, herbivorous dinosaurs like Triceratops and Ankylosaurus, some of the toughest dinosaurs of their time. At times, the T-Rex would also prey upon other large carnivorous dinosaurs, showcasing its predatory prowess. It's believed that T-Rex may have occasionally targeted individuals of its own kind, demonstrating the sheer dominance and terror of this apex predator. The Tyrannosaurus rex had a significant impact on its surroundings beyond its role as a hunter. Its presence necessitated changes in the behavior of other animals. Some dinosaurs developed defenses like speed or armor to evade its attacks, while others sought refuge in dense forests or migrated to new areas. As the dominant predator, T-Rex reshaped prey distribution and population dynamics, influencing ecological balance and predator-prey relationships. The Tyrannosaurus rex shared its environment with a diverse array of other dinosaurs, each possessing unique adaptations and behaviors. Among these were Edmontosaurus, Triceratops, Stegosaurus, Torosaurus, Albertosaurus, Pachycephalosaurus, Denversaurus, Ornithomimus, and Ansu. Forget horned helmets and storm-tossed seas. I've been reading about the Vikings facing something far more terrifying. Creatures so colossal and powerful, they seemed ripped from legend. These weren't just animals. They were giants of a dying world, beasts that could crush ships and skewer warriors in an instant. I'm thinking about the clash between iron blades and wooden shields against the raw power of nature itself. These battles must have been so intense they became legends whispered for centuries. The first beast our Norse ancestors regularly encountered was the magnificent aurochs, wild cattle unlike anything alive today. I picture them standing at a towering 1.8 meters, or 6 feet, at the shoulder. These weren't your typical farm animals. A full-grown aurochs bull could weigh up to 1,000 kilograms, or 200 to 100 pounds, with a muscular frame that dwarfed even the largest modern cattle breeds. What truly made the aurochs intimidating, though, were their enormous horns, curved weapons that could span up to 1 meter, or 3.3 feet, from tip to tip. These weren't merely defensive tools, they were perfectly designed killing instruments. The forward-facing orientation allowed bulls to charge directly at threats with enough force to impale a fully armored warrior, or even flip a small boat. I've read that archaeological evidence suggests aurochs' horns were often kept as trophies after successful hunts, becoming drinking vessels for the most prestigious Viking warriors. The relationship between Vikings and aurochs was more than just survival. It was woven into their very culture, leaving a mark on Norse art, symbolism, and even the warrior mindset. Hunting these beasts was a true test of courage for young Norse warriors. Unlike modern hunting, where distance and firearms provide safety, Viking hunters had to approach within spear-throwing range, close enough to smell the animal's breath. A charging aurochs could reach speeds of 35 kilometers or 22 miles per hour, leaving hunters with mere seconds to make their throw or face the consequences. It's sobering to read that many Norse graves contain evidence of horn wounds, silent testimony to hunts gone wrong. By the Viking Age, aurochs populations were already declining across Europe due to habitat loss and hunting preyers. The last known aurochs died in 1627 in Poland's Jaguar-Sized forest, long after the Viking era had ended. But the land wasn't the only domain where Vikings encountered magnificent creatures that have since vanished. The seas that formed their highways held their own vanished giants. If I had sailed with Vikings across the North Atlantic, I would have witnessed an extraordinary sight along rocky coastlines, colonies of thousands of black and white birds standing upright like tiny sentinels. The great auk, often called the original penguin, bore a striking resemblance to its southern hemisphere counterparts, despite having no direct relation. Standing about 75 to 85 centimeters, or 2.5 to 2.8 feet tall, these flightless birds were perfectly adapted to the cold waters of the North Atlantic. Their wings had transformed into powerful flippers that propelled them through the ocean with remarkable speed. Measurements based on similar birds suggest they could fly underwater at up to 35 kilometers, or 22 miles per hour. On land, however, they were awkwardly vulnerable, waddling upright on two legs, unable to take flight when danger approached. For Vikings, the great auk represented an almost absurdly convenient resource. Unlike most prey that required chasing, these birds couldn't flee effectively on land, nor seafarers could simply walk among nesting colonies and select their victims. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements in Iceland, Greenland, and the Faroe Islands reveals vast quantities of great auk bones in kitchen middens, often showing cut marks consistent with meat removal. The great auk's waterproof feathers were prized for insulation and bedding. Its fat provided lamp oil, and its beaks became decorative items. A Viking burial in Norway even featured a necklace with 5 great auk beaks, hinting at both symbolic and practical value. Ironically, the bird's marine adaptations made it vulnerable, breeding only on a few remote islands, laying a single egg on rocky ground. By the Viking Age, human hunting had already forced some colonies to vanish. The great auk's final extinction didn't occur until 1844, when the last confirmed pair was killed on the island of Eldey off Iceland. A sad epilogue to a relationship that began when the first Norse ships reached their breeding grounds. The birds that had once numbered in the millions, forming colonies so vast they darkened shorelines, vanished because they had no natural defense against human predation. While Vikings ventured across vast oceans, the forests that surrounded their settlements held creatures just as remarkable and far more dangerous. Among these was a distinct forest giant that many researchers now believe represented a specialized hybrid population, the European forest elk, or skogselg, a creature that combined characteristics of what we now classify as separate moose and elk species. I imagine them standing up to 2.1 meters or 7 feet at the shoulder, with magnificent palmate antlers spanning up to 1.8 meters or 6 feet across. These forest giants were truly imposing. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals distinctive antler configurations unlike modern European moose populations, suggesting these animals represented a unique genetic lineage that has since disappeared through hunting preyers and hybridization with other cervid populations. What made these forest elk particularly remarkable was their coloration and behavior. Unlike modern moose with their uniformly dark coats, Viking era, there's something haunting about the thought of these massive deer that once roamed Scandinavia. Cave paintings whisper of light patches on their sides and shoulders, a natural camouflage for the dappled forest light. I imagine them moving silently through the trees, almost like ghosts. They were apparently more aggressive than modern moose, especially the bulls during mating season. Rather than simply competing, they would actively defend their territories. For the Vikings, these animals were more than just a sight to behold. They were a vital lifeline. A single one could offer over 500 kilo, that's 100 tautlo of meat, enough to sustain a small village for weeks during the brutal northern winters. Their hides, far tougher than cattle leather, became prized materials for shields, boats, and winter clothing. But perhaps most tread of all were their enormous antlers. Viking craftsmen shaped them into everything from tools and weapons to ornate drinking horns fit for feasts and kings. By the late Viking age, though, these forest elk were already in decline. Intensive hunting, coupled with the relentless clearing of forests for agriculture, fragmented their habitat across Scandinavia. As Viking settlements expanded, encounters with these magnificent beasts became increasingly rare. Medieval texts began to describe them as creatures of the remote wilderness, not animals commonly seen near human settlements. But these forest giants weren't the only creatures that shaped Viking survival. Deep within Scandinavia's icy rivers lurked another unexpected powerhouse, one that proved just as valuable and equally dangerous. Today, spotting a whale feels like a rare and wondrous sight, but for Viking sailors, such encounters often turned into high-stakes battles. Gray whales were a valuable prize, offering meat, oil, and bone. But hunting them meant rowing dangerously close, where a single thrash of the whale's tail could shatter a longship and send its crew to a cold, watery grave. Unlike most whale species that still inhabit northern seas today, the Atlantic gray whale population was driven to complete extinction by the 18th century. But during the Viking Age, these magnificent marine mammals were abundant, especially in coastal waters. They reached lengths of 14 to 15 meters, or 46 to 49 feet, comparable to modern gray whales in the Pacific, and weighed up to 36 tons. That's roughly the size of a Viking longship. Their mottled gray coloration, often covered with barnacles and whale lice, gave them a distinctive appearance that found its way into Norse deions of sea creatures. What made gray whales unique was their feeding strategy. Unlike deep-diving species, they were bottom feeders, plowing the sea floor for small invertebrates, creating massive mud plumes visible from the surface. This habit brought them into shallow coastal waters, precisely where Viking ships operated most frequently. A single whale could yield up to 20 tons of meat and blubber, enough to feed an entire Viking settlement through the harsh northern winter. Archaeological evidence shows specialized bone tools designed for processing whale meat, alongside huge cooking pits that could only have been used for creatures of this size. The hunting of gray whales wasn't without peril. Unlike passive species, such as the right whale, gray whales were known for their aggressive defense when threatened. They would often charge attacking boats, using their massive flukes to smash wooden vessels to splinters. Norse sagas contain accounts of whaling expeditions ending in disaster when cornered whales fought back, earning them the nickname devil fish among later whalers. What made Atlantic gray whales particularly vulnerable to hunting was their predictable migration patterns and coastal breeding grounds. Each year, they would travel along well-established routes between feeding areas in the north and calving grounds further south. Vikings, with their intimate knowledge of coastal geography, could anticipate these movements and set up ambush points where the whales would be channeled through narrow passages. By the late Viking Age, gray whale populations were already showing signs of depletion in areas of heaviest Norse settlement. The combination of increased whaling efficiency and the species' low reproductive rate set the stage for their eventual disappearance from Atlantic waters. But while Vikings battled colossal whales at sea, their struggles didn't end once they reached dry land. The forests of Britain were home to predators just as fierce and far less predictable. In the late 8th century, when Viking longships first landed on the shores of Britain and Ireland, they entered territories where another formidable predator had long reigned supreme, the British wolf. These wolves, genetically distinct from their Scandinavian cousins, had dominated the British Isles for thousands of years before Norse settlers arrived to carve out new kingdoms. Standing taller than the Honshu wolf of Japan, but smaller than modern timber wolves, British wolves typically reached heights of 70 to 85 centimeters, or 28 to 33 inches, at the shoulder, and weighed between 30 to 45 kilo, or 66 to 99 lbia. Their thick, often gray-brown coats were adapted to the damp conditions of the British Isles, with distinctive white markings frequently appearing on their chests, a feature noted in several Viking-era Daons. When Vikings first raided Lindisfarne in 793 CE, wolves remained common throughout Britain and Ireland, with packs controlling territories from the Scottish Highlands. I've often wondered what it must have been like to walk through the forests of southern England 1,000 years ago. Archaeological evidence tells a story of early Viking settlements in the Hebrides and Northern Isles, revealing wolf bones marked by cuts. The newcomers, it seems, quickly began hunting these predators. For Vikings establishing permanent colonies in the British Isles, wolves presented a complex duality, threat and opportunity. Their attacks on livestock, especially sheep, so vital to the Norse economy in places like the Orkneys and Hebrides, made them natural enemies. Yet, Viking warriors also respected the predator's hunting skills and pack coordination, qualities they themselves valued in battle. This complex relationship is etched into Norse place names still scattered across former Viking territories in Britain. Places like Olvedale, Wolf Valley in Cumbria, and Wolf Hill in Perthshire mark areas where Norse settlers frequently encountered these predators. Viking-era runestones discovered in northern England depict wolf hunts, hinting at the ceremonial significance of these dangerous pursuits for warriors establishing their prowess in new lands. British wolves also found their way into Viking folklore. As Norse settlers integrated with local populations, they adopted and transformed Celtic wolf myths into their own traditions. The wolf-warrior connection strengthened, with berserkers sometimes described as wearing wolf pelts instead of bear skins. But the fate of British wolves was sealed not by Vikings, but by their descendants. As Norse settlements transitioned into medieval kingdoms, systematic wolf extermination became policy. The process, begun during the Viking Age, accelerated afterward. The last wolves in England were eliminated during the 15th century, and Scotland's final wolves clung on until the 17th century. Ireland's last wolf was reportedly killed in 1786, ending a predator lineage that had witnessed everything from the first Celtic settlers to the Viking invasions and beyond. There was another animal that they encountered, a relic from a more primeval age, the Atlantic and Baltic sturgeons. These armored leviathans lurked beneath the rivers and coastal waters of northern Europe. These living fossils, largely unchanged for over 200 million years, once dominated the waterways of Viking territories, but have since vanished from much of their historical range. The Baltic sturgeon was truly massive, with females growing up to 10 feet in length and weighing over 650 pounds. Their prehistoric appearance, with bony plates called scutes, arranged in 5 rows along their bodies instead of scales, made them unmistakable among European fish species. Most distinctive was their elongated, armor-plated snout, with a vacuum-like mouth underneath, perfectly designed for sucking up mollusks and crustaceans from river and sea floors. Their immense size made a single catch noteworthy enough to feature in regional sagas, with several Norse tales mentioning heroes who wrestled armored river dragons. Archaeological evidence from Viking settlements reveals specialized sturgeon spears with detachable heads designed to penetrate the fish's armored exterior, a testament to how important these catches were to Viking fishermen. Beyond their meat, sturgeons offered multiple valuable resources. Their swim bladders were processed into isinglass, used for clarifying beer and wine, as well as making a powerful adhesive. Their cartilaginous skeletons, when boiled, produced a gelatin used in Viking medicine for joint ailments. Most prized was sturgeon roe, caviar, which became a delicacy reserved for jarls and kings. By the late Viking Age, sturgeon populations were already in decline in heavily settled areas. Their slow reproduction, females maturing at 15 to 20 years, made them vulnerable to overfishing. Predictable spawning runs and their habit of basking near the surface made them easy targets. In the medieval period, dams blocked spawning routes and pollution worsened their plight. By the 18th century, Baltic sturgeon had grown so rare that Scandinavian monarchs claimed them as royal property, a protection that came too late to save them. But as Vikings turned their sights inland, the armored giants of the rivers gave way to shaggy titans of the forest, the European bison and its forest-dwelling cousin, the wisent. Unlike the American bison we know today, these European relatives were specifically adapted to the dense mixed forests that once covered much of northern and eastern Europe. Standing up to 6.2 feet at the shoulder and weighing over 2,000 pounds, the European bison was the heaviest land animal in Europe during the Viking Age. Bulls developed massive shoulder humps covered with shaggy dark brown fur that contrasted with the lighter coat on their lower bodies. Their distinctive curved horns, though shorter than those of the aurochs, were equally dangerous when the animal charged. Unlike grassland bison, these woodland giants could navigate between trees with surprising agility, using their powerful bodies to create paths through the densest undergrowth. These natural trails, maintained over generations of use, became known to Vikings as bison roads, reliable routes through otherwise impenetrable forest that human travelers would follow. For Viking communities pushing into new territories, these massive herbivores represented both opportunity and challenge. A successful bison hunt could provide meat for an entire village for weeks, along with hides thick enough to stop arrows, making them prized material for shields and winter clothing. The distinctive hump contained concentrated fat reserves that produced high-quality oil for lamps and waterproofing. However, hunting these forest behemoths was extraordinarily dangerous. Unlike deer or smaller game, wounded bison would typically. The Viking sagas tell grim tales of entire hunting parties wiped out by enraged bulls. These weren't ordinary cattle, but European bison, massive creatures capable of charging at 40 kilometers an hour, even through dense woods. The power of a single charge could be lethal to multiple hunters. By the late Viking Age, I understand that bison populations were already dwindling. Intensive hunting and deforestation forced these magnificent animals into smaller and smaller areas. Unlike the aurochs, though, the European bison narrowly avoided total extinction. A small group hung on in the Białowieża forest between Poland and Belarus. And it's amazing to think that today, around 7,000 descendants of those bison still live there, a direct link to the forest giants that Vikings once hunted. It strikes me that the world the Vikings knew was disappearing even as they explored and settled. The creatures that had shaped their landscapes were fading, pushed toward extinction by the very same human expansion and climate shifts that drove the Viking Age itself.